a child no one chose. The first time anyone heard Amara speak, she was 6 years old. The words were soft, barely above a whisper, and laced with uncertainty. "Is this house real?" The caseworker, a woman named Jill, had paused in the doorway with Amara's tiny hand in hers. "Yes, sweetheart. This is your new foster home." Amara didn't ask again. She simply walked inside with the cautious grace of someone who had known too many places that promised safety and delivered silence instead. Too many strangers calling themselves temporary, then disappearing before bedtime stories could become traditions. Too many nights where hugs were just hollow gestures and love was something you watched in movies. She had been through 6 foster homes before she turned 7. Each stay shorter than the last. Some placements ended with polite phone calls requesting her removal. Others ended with shouting matches between couples who said she was too much to handle. No one stayed long enough to find out who she was beneath the trauma. To Amara, it seemed clear, she was unlovable. And then came Elliot Dawson. He was the kind of man who didn't look like a savior. Just over 40, with weathered jeans, flannel shirts that smelled of pine and smoke, and calloused hands from working as a carpenter. He lived in a modest home on the edge of a quiet town called Maple Glen, surrounded by trees that turned gold in October and snow white by January. Elliot had applied to be a foster parent after years of volunteering at a local youth shelter. When the agency asked why, his answer was simple. Some kids just need one person who won't leave. Jill hesitated to place Amara with Elliot. Not because she doubted his heart, but because Amara was already fading into that hard-to-place category. Withdrawn. Guarded. Prone to outbursts when frightened. She didn't trust adults. She didn't trust hugs. She didn't trust the word forever. But Elliot insisted. "Let me try," he said. So Jill pulled up to his house that Friday morning. It was snowing lightly, just enough to leave specks on Amara's jacket. The girl didn't cry when Jill hugged her goodbye. She never did. She just stared at the house like she was stepping into another short chapter in a book she didn't get to write. The house was quiet but warm. A wood stove crackled in the corner. The walls were lined with books, old photographs, and a shelf with hand-carved toys. "Hi, Amara," Elliot said. "I'm Elliot. You can call me that, or anything you're comfortable with. This is your room." He opened a door revealing a small bedroom with lavender curtains, a bookshelf, and a bedspread patterned with stars. On the nightstand sat a stuffed rabbit with one floppy ear and a stitched-on heart. Amara stepped inside and stood still. "You can touch anything. Or nothing. I'll give you space." That was the first surprise. No forced introductions. No overwhelming questions. Just space. Days passed. Amara said very little. She watched Elliot from corners and doorways. She'd sit at the edge of the dinner table, never finishing her plate. She refused to sleep under the covers. She flinched when footsteps came too close. And yet, Elliot didn't push. He greeted her every morning. Sat across from her during meals, sometimes telling stories about the animals he saw in the woods or the time he built a treehouse for a boy who couldn't speak. He let silence be a language. He made her cocoa without asking. Left nightlights in the hallway. Replaced the batteries in her favorite toy without saying a word. One night, a storm rolled in, thunder cracking like the sky was breaking apart. Amara bolted from her room and crouched behind the couch, covering her ears. Elliot didn't rush. He walked slowly, sat a few feet away on the floor, and said, "Storms used to scare me too. I used to think they were angry. But someone once told me thunder is just the clouds talking to each other." Amara peeked out from her knees. "Do they argue a lot?" Elliot smiled. "Only when they care." It was the first time she smiled back. Weeks turned into months. Amara began to speak more, though rarely about her past. She loved books. She hated loud music. She painted watercolors of trees and wolves. She still jumped when the phone rang. But slowly, carefully, she stopped flinching when Elliot handed her things. She started eating more than just bread at dinner. She started asking questions. Once, she even called his name when she woke up from a nightmare. "Elliot," she whispered in the dark. "I'm here," he said, entering her room without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." One Sunday, as they walked through the woods behind the house, Amara said something that made Elliot stop in his tracks. "Why did you pick me?" He turned to her, hands in his jacket pockets. "I didn't pick you, Amara. I met you. And then I chose to stay." She stared up at him. Her breath formed a cloud in the winter air. Other people laughed. "I know. Will you?" Elliot crouched so they were eye level. "Even if you yell? Even if you get scared or make mistakes or don't talk to me for a week, I'm not going anywhere." "Why?" "Because you're not just a foster kid to me. You're someone I care about. Someone worth showing up for." Tears welled up in her eyes. She turned away quickly, pretending to look at the trees. But she slipped her hand into his. He didn't say anything. He just held it gently as they walked. But not all wounds heal cleanly. Trauma leaves behind shadows that don't always fade with kindness. One evening, after a difficult day at school where a teacher made a careless comment about her real parents, Amara lashed out. She threw a glass, screamed that she hated everything, and slammed her door so hard the frame shook. Elliot didn't raise his voice. He simply sat outside her room and said, "I'm still here, Amara. Even now." She didn't answer. But the next morning, she quietly swept up the broken glass before school. And that night, she left a folded drawing on the kitchen table. It showed a little girl holding hands with a tall man in front of a house with stars above it. Underneath, in small letters, it said, "Maybe someday, I can call you Dad." Elliot cried when he read it. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, deep release, the kind that only comes when love finally begins to settle in a place it had never been allowed to bloom before. That winter, Amara turned 8. She asked if Elliot would sit next to her at her class assembly. She asked if he could make his pancakes with blueberries like last time. She asked if he'd help her build a birdhouse. She started asking to be seen. And Elliot always answered yes. Because love wasn't something he gave her conditionally. It wasn't something she had to earn. It was something she'd had all along, he was just waiting for her to believe it. The day she let him in. Snow had started to melt on the edges of Maple Glen, leaving behind puddles that reflected the gray sky. It had been nearly 4 months since Amara came to live with Elliot Dawson, and for most of that time, their relationship existed in a careful, quiet balance, like a fragile piece of glass between them, unbroken but never quite safe. Amara still hadn't called him Dad. In fact, she rarely called him anything. But she no longer avoided his eyes. She no longer stiffened when he knelt to tie her shoes or set her coat on the hook beside his. And every now and then, on days when the world was kind to her, she would laugh. Those laughs were rare, sudden, and so unexpected that Elliot often paused just to soak them in, like a man stumbling across music in the middle of a desert. She still had questions she never asked aloud. Why do people lie when they say they'll stay? Why did her birth mother never come back? Why did the world always make her feel like an extra instead of someone in the story? But those questions sat at the bottom of her heart like stones, untouched. Until the day Elliot fell sick. It began on a Thursday morning. Elliot stood in the kitchen, pouring Amara's orange juice, when he coughed deep and rough. He brushed it off, said it was probably dust from the old attic he'd been cleaning. But by evening, he was pale and shaky, struggling to get up from the couch. Amara watched him, her eyes narrowed with something deeper than worry. Fear. That night, she hovered by his door and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" Elliot looked up from his recliner, where he had wrapped himself in 2 blankets. "Just a bug, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." She nodded and left. But she didn't sleep. At 2:17 a.m., she crept into the kitchen, climbed onto the counter, and retrieved the digital thermometer from the medicine cabinet. She padded into the living room, waking Elliot gently. I want to check, she said, pressing the thermometer to his forehead. Where'd you learn that? He asked, a faint smile on his lips. I watched. And I remember. She frowned at the reading. You have a fever. Elliot chuckled. Smart kid. But to Amara, it wasn't a joke. People who got sick disappeared. They went to the hospital and didn't come back. Or they stayed in bed for days, and when they woke up, they said things like, "This isn't working," or "We can't take care of her anymore." She had heard it all before. Colds weren't just colds. They were signs of goodbyes. So she stayed up that night, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a pillow, watching over him like a tiny guardian. And when Elliot opened his eyes at sunrise, bleary and congested, she whispered, "I can make toast." He blinked. You, what? I'll make you toast and tea, she said, standing quickly. You should rest. She had never done that before. Never tried to take care of anyone. In the days that followed, Elliot's illness lingered like a guest who refused to leave. Nothing serious, just a stubborn flu. But Amara took it personally. She brought him juice. Read him pages from her favorite books. She even drew little get-well-soon cards with misshapen hearts and suns that wore sunglasses. One card read, "You're allowed to get sick. But don't leave. Okay?" Elliot folded the card and tucked it in his wallet. He didn't say anything right away, afraid that if he spoke, he might cry. Instead, he tapped the spot beside him on the couch. She climbed up, tentatively. Sat with her knees pulled to her chest. He didn't reach for her. He just sat in silence, watching the fire flicker in the stove. After a few minutes, she leaned against his shoulder. And just like that, the wall cracked. That Sunday, Amara asked if she could help him cook. They made soup, bad soup. The kind that came from a can and didn't quite mix right, but it tasted like effort and smelled like belonging. She laughed when Elliot sneezed into the wrong bowl and had to start over. He made a joke about sneeze seasoning, and she rolled her eyes dramatically, the way children do when they feel safe enough to tease back. Later, she took his tools out of the shed and asked to build something together. What do you want to build? He asked. I don't know. Something that stays. So they built a birdhouse. It was crooked and missing a shingle. But she painted it lavender and signed her name on the side in shaky block letters. Then she handed him the brush. You sign too, she said. He dipped the brush and added his name beneath hers. Amara and Elliot. That night, as he tucked her in, she asked him a question she hadn't dared ask before. If you get better, will I still be here? Elliot's breath caught in his throat. He sat at the edge of her bed, running his hand gently over the comforter. Amara, he said softly, you're not here because I'm healthy or strong. You're here because I chose you. And even if I'm sick or tired or not perfect, I'll still choose you. She looked at him, eyes wide. But what if I mess up? Then we'll clean it up together. But what if I don't call you Dad? He smiled. Then I'll still be Elliot. But I'll love you like a dad anyway. Tears welled in her eyes, and she turned her head into the pillow, ashamed to cry. But Elliot didn't leave. He sat there, his hand resting on the blanket, and said, I know love doesn't come easy for you. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes. Even if it takes forever. The next morning, she stood in the doorway while he read the newspaper with a hot mug in his hand. She hesitated, chewing her lip. Then she said, quietly, like she was testing the word on her tongue. Dad? Elliot looked up. Stunned. Her eyes were locked on the floor, like she wasn't sure if she'd done something wrong. He set the mug down and stood. I'm here, he said. She nodded. Okay. And then she ran to him, not walked, ran and wrapped her arms around his waist. He sank to his knees and hugged her tightly, not speaking, not needing to. In that moment, something invisible and sacred passed between them. The last of her defenses crumbled. She had let him in. Not because he'd earned it with presents or promises. But because, for the first time in her life, someone stayed. To be continued in Part 3, The Secrets She Never Told. The Secrets She Never Told. Spring came slowly to Maple Glen, each day peeling away a little more of winter's gloom. Buds stretched cautiously from tree limbs. Sunlight spilled a little warmer through the windows. Amara had begun smiling more, never too wide, never without reason, but enough that it startled Elliot when he caught her humming in the hallway or drawing smiley faces in the fogged-up bathroom mirror. She was healing. But some wounds stayed hidden, even when everything looked okay on the outside. One Saturday morning, Elliot planned a day trip to the local art museum, Amara's idea. She had taken a quiet interest in sketching lately, and Elliot, ever supportive, encouraged her. "You pick a gallery, and I'll get us those sketchbooks you like," he said. She nodded, eyes bright. "Can we get the gel pens too? The ones with glitter?" "Absolutely. We're going all out." That afternoon, while Elliot stood in the museum cafe ordering snacks, Amara wandered into a room filled with portraits, rows and rows of faces, most of them staring off into distant horizons, lost in oil paint thoughts. She stopped in front of one particular painting, a young girl in a faded yellow dress, standing barefoot in a field. Her expression was blank, yet behind her eyes was something Amara knew too well, the ache of being left behind. She stood staring until a voice startled her. "You like that one?" Amara turned to see a security guard smiling kindly at her. "I guess," she muttered. "My daughter says that painting looks like her when she's sad." Amara didn't reply. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Her heart started to race. Not because of the man, but because of the word he'd used, daughter. Later that night, Elliot noticed something was off. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She was silent. The kind of silence that stretches too long. The kind that echoes with thoughts too heavy for someone her age. At dinner, he tried gently, "Hey, what's on your mind?" She shrugged, pushing rice around her plate. "Nothing." "Okay. But I'm here, you know. Always." She nodded. But she didn't speak. That silence stretched for 2 more days. Then, on Monday morning, while Elliot was cleaning out the garage, he opened a dusty cardboard box labeled "Miscellaneous, Old School Stuff." Inside were Amara's notebooks and drawings from before she'd come to live with him, items the caseworker had delivered weeks after the placement. He had never looked too deeply before. He respected her privacy. But something made him pause now. He opened a sketchbook. On the first page, a rough drawing of a house with bars on the windows. On the second, a picture of a girl with no mouth. Just eyes. Giant, watchful eyes. Above it, in slanted, scratchy pencil. "I don't speak. No one listens." That night, he left the sketchbook on the kitchen table unopened, untouched. A gentle invitation. When Amara came in for her nightly tea, she froze. Saw it. She stared at it for a long time. Then said, "You looked?" "No," he replied honestly. "I stopped after page 2. I didn't want to cross a line." She stood motionless. Then slowly pulled out a chair. "I used to draw when I couldn't cry," she whispered. "Because sometimes crying got me punished." Elliot's breath caught. He moved slowly, sitting across from her. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick. Amara's fingers brushed over the cover of the sketchbook. "They said crying was manipulation. That if I wanted attention, I had to earn it." Elliot closed his eyes for a moment. His hands curled into fists under the table. "You never have to earn love here," he said quietly. "You never have to earn being seen." She didn't respond for a while. Then, "Do you know what it's like to want to scream, but not know if anyone would care?" Elliot nodded once. "I think I do. I've been there. And it's lonely." Silence again. Until Amara whispered, "I used to pretend I was invisible. At least then it wouldn't hurt when people didn't see me." From that night on, things changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But the dam had broken. And the truth began to trickle through. She started telling Elliot bits of her past, shards of memory that had cut her for years. Like the foster home where she was made to sleep in a basement because she was too loud. Or the one where her favorite stuffed animal was thrown away as punishment for wetting the bed. Or the way one family had returned her after 8 months because she wasn't bonding fast enough. "They gave up on me," she said one night as they sat on the porch. "Like I was a dog that didn't learn tricks fast enough." Elliot's jaw clenched. But his voice stayed soft. "Amara, what they did to you was wrong. And none of it was your fault." She wiped at her eyes. "But what if I'm too broken now? What if I can't be normal?" "Who told you that normal was the goal?" he said. "I don't want you to be normal. I want you to be you. That's who I chose." One Sunday afternoon, Elliot handed her a wrapped box. "No reason," he said. "Just felt like today needed a bit of magic." She opened it slowly, unwrapping the paper with careful fingers. Inside was a leather-bound journal with her name engraved on the front in gold. Amara looked up, confused. "I figured," Elliot said, "if your drawings told the stories you couldn't say before, maybe now you'd want to write the ones you can." She blinked, lips parted. "This is mine?" He smiled. "All yours." That evening, she sat by the window, pen in hand, journal on her lap. Elliot passed by quietly, not interrupting. Hours later, she left it on the coffee table. Curious but respectful, he waited until she was asleep before opening it. There was only one page written on. But it was enough. "Today I didn't feel invisible. Today I told someone the truth." And he stayed. "Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm just beginning." The moment that changed everything. Spring gave way to early summer in Maple Glen, and with it came a slow but beautiful transformation, not just outside, with wildflowers blooming and the hum of bees returning, but inside Elliot's home too. And most importantly, inside Amara. It was a transformation no one else would have noticed, but Elliot did. He noticed the way her laughter was no longer forced. The way she let her eyes meet his without flinching. How she started leaving her bedroom door open a crack at night. Healing, he'd come to learn, didn't look like movie montages or magical moments. It was made of small victories. Daily ones. Quiet ones. And one of those victories came one Friday afternoon in June. It started with a letter. Amara had come home from school holding a crumpled envelope in her hand, her face pale and lips pressed together in that way that meant she was trying not to feel something. Elliot was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when she dropped the envelope on the table. "They want me to speak." He turned, drying his hands. "Who does?" She took a breath. "The family court. The judge. They want me to speak at the hearing. About you." His heart skipped. "The adoption hearing. They said it could help things move faster. If I speak up. But I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to," Elliot said gently. "This isn't a performance. It's your story, Amara. You control it." But she shook her head. "No. I want to say something. I just don't know how." For the next few days, she grew quiet again, but it was a different quiet this time. It wasn't fear. It was reflection. She'd sit in the backyard with her journal, writing and scratching out, muttering to herself and starting over. One night, she tiptoed into Elliot's study and asked, "Will you listen to something?" He immediately shut his laptop. "Always." She handed him a folded piece of paper and sat across from him on the rug, hugging her knees. It was a speech. But more than that, it was a letter to the universe. A truth finally finding its voice. He read it silently. By the third paragraph, his hands were trembling. "When I first met Elliot, I thought it was just another stop. Another home with good intentions. I was good at spotting the fake kindness. I was good at not getting my hopes up. But he didn't act like the others. He didn't talk at me, he listened. He didn't ask me to prove myself. He just showed up. Every day. Without expecting anything back. I tested him. I tried to push him away. I needed to know if he'd leave like the others. But he didn't. He stayed. Through the silence. The nightmares. The hard days. For the first time in my life, I feel like someone sees me, not the file, not the label, not the broken kid. Just me. I never had a dad before. I didn't know what it felt like to be protected. But now I do. When he looked up, tears shone in his eyes. I don't need to change a word, he said, voice thick. That's the most powerful thing I've ever read. The day of the hearing arrived like thunder in the distance, foreboding, inevitable. Amara wore a navy blue dress and small silver earrings that Elliot had bought her for her birthday. She looked older. Not just in clothes, but in poise. In spirit. In the car, she was silent, clutching a small notebook with shaking fingers. You don't have to read it if you don't feel up to it, Elliot said gently as he drove. Just being here says everything. She looked at him. No. I want to. I hope they believe me. They will, he said. But even if they didn't, I do. That's what matters. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Warmer, in a way. There were wooden benches, a few state flags, and a woman in a soft lavender suit who introduced herself as Judge Hernandez. She smiled kindly at Amara. You have the floor, sweetheart. Whenever you're ready. Amara took a deep breath, stepped up to the microphone, and opened her notebook. At first, her voice trembled. But with each sentence, it grew stronger. Clearer. More certain. The courtroom was silent. No shifting, no coughing. Just the sound of one girl's truth filling a space that had once been filled with fear. When she finished, there was no applause, just the soft sound of someone wiping away tears. Then another. Even the judge had glassy eyes. Judge Hernandez leaned forward. Amara, thank you. That was brave. And beautiful. And everything this court needed to hear. She turned to Elliot. Mr. Quinn, you've already demonstrated your commitment to Amara in the deepest ways. But is there anything you'd like to add before I make my decision? Elliot stood. He didn't pull out a speech. He didn't need one. All I'll say is this, I didn't go looking for a daughter. But now that I have her, I can't imagine a life without her. She's not just part of my story now, she is my story. Judge Hernandez smiled. Well, then. She turned over her paperwork, clicked her pen, and stamped the final form. From this moment forward, Amara Quinn is legally your daughter. There was a beat. Then Amara gasped. And in the next instant, she was in Elliot's arms, sobbing, laughing, saying his name over and over like a prayer she'd finally been allowed to speak out loud. Later that night, they had a small celebration, just the two of them. Cake. Music. A hand-painted sign that said, "Welcome home forever." She looked around the living room and whispered, I used to think no one would ever want me. That I'd be passed around forever. Elliot pulled her into a hug. You're not going anywhere, kiddo. You're home. For good. What she did next left everyone speechless. Adoption day didn't end with cake and hugs. For Amara, it was the beginning of a brand new chapter, and for the first time, she was the one holding the pen. The following week, everything felt different. Her room looked warmer. The house felt safer. Even school, once a gray, monotonous obligation, now seemed like an opportunity. She wasn't the foster kid anymore. She was Amara Quinn, daughter of Elliot Quinn. But freedom didn't mean forgetting. Amara's past had shaped her. And she'd made a quiet decision, she was going to do something with it. One Thursday evening, Elliot came home to find Amara sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of paper, a glue stick, and an old photo album opened in front of her. "Scrapbooking?" he asked, hanging his coat. She nodded. "Kind of. I'm working on something for school. We're supposed to make a life map." He smiled. "Need help?" She shook her head. "No, but I do need your permission." "For what?" Amara slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a letter, handwritten and carefully worded. "I want to speak at the school assembly next month. They're having a theme, Voices of Strength. I told Mrs. Monroe a little about my story, and she said I could be one of the speakers." Elliot blinked. "You want to talk about your life? On stage? In front of everyone?" Her eyes held a quiet fire. "I want to show people what it means to go from being unseen to being loved." He nodded slowly. "Okay, but are you ready for that? It's a big thing." "I'm ready. I have something to say, and someone who taught me that I matter." For the next few weeks, Amara poured herself into preparation. Every evening, she practiced in front of a mirror, rewriting lines and timing herself. Sometimes she'd whisper parts under her breath while riding the school bus. Sometimes Elliot would hear her rehearsing in her room at midnight, her voice soft but steady. One day, Elliot surprised her with something special, a small Bluetooth microphone. "Thought you could use a little practice with the real deal," he said, handing it over. She lit up. "You're the best. And hey," he added with a wink, "I expect front row seats when you make it big." The day of the assembly arrived with early morning fog and a rush of nerves. Amara wore a deep burgundy blouse and black slacks, nothing flashy, but strong. Her curls were pinned back, her notebook tucked carefully into her bag. Elliot walked her to the front steps of the school. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, gently touching her shoulder. She nodded, lips tight. "I'm nervous. But it's the good kind." He gave her a fist bump. "Go break some hearts and heal some souls." The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, parents, even a few local community leaders. When it was her turn, Amara walked slowly to the microphone. For a second, she stared at the sea of faces. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Then she opened her notebook and began. "Most people think foster care is just a system. A place where kids live until something better comes along. But I wasn't waiting for better. I was just trying to survive. Before I met my dad, I had lived in 6 different homes. In some, I was a number. In others, a burden. I learned to keep my bag packed. I learned not to get too attached. I thought love was something other people got. Then, someone showed me otherwise. He didn't come in with grand promises. He didn't expect perfection. He just showed up. Day after day. Listening. Understanding. Waiting for me to come out from behind the wall I'd built. And when I did, he didn't run. He stayed. I've been asked why I'm willing to share this. Why talk about something so personal? Because there's another kid out there like I was, quiet, scared, unsure if anyone will ever truly see them. And maybe they'll hear this and realize they're not alone. Maybe they'll believe in hope again. I'm not invisible anymore. My name is Amara Quinn. And I am finally home. Silence blanketed the room when she finished. Then came the standing ovation. It wasn't loud at first, just a few teachers and Elliot, clapping with quiet reverence. But then it swelled. The whole room stood. Cheers. Applause. Tears. Amara stood still for a moment, overwhelmed. But then she smiled. She didn't bow. She didn't need to. She just nodded. And walked off stage with her head held high. Later, Elliot found her behind the curtain, sitting on a bench and hugging her knees. "Hey, superstar," he said. She looked up. "I don't know what just happened." I think I blacked out. He laughed. That was incredible, Amara. You weren't just brave. You were unforgettable. She shrugged. It felt right. He sat beside her. That's how you know it matters. After a pause, she said, I didn't think I'd cry. But when I saw everyone standing. You didn't cry, Elliot said with a soft smile. You rose. There's a difference. That evening, Amara's speech went viral. A teacher had recorded it and posted it with the title, Foster Kid Turned Daughter, Her Speech Will Break and Heal Your Heart. Within 48 hours, it had over 500,000 views. Messages poured in from all over the country. Former foster kids. Social workers. Parents. Teens who'd never told their own stories until now. Elliot read one out loud. I've been in care for 10 years. No one ever told me I could be more than what happened to me. Thank you, Amara. Amara blinked away tears. She looked at Elliot. I think I want to keep doing this. Speaking? Sharing. Helping others find their voice. You've got a gift, he said. And now you've found a reason to use it. That night, she opened her journal. At the top of a blank page, she wrote. Step 1, survive. Step 2, speak. Step 3, make it count. She changed more lives than she ever imagined. The morning after her speech went viral, Amara woke up to a buzzing phone and a flood of unread messages. She blinked against the light, scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, and email. Thousands of notifications. Dozens of strangers tagging her. Comments pouring in. You don't know me, but your story helped me tell my adoptive mom I love her. You made me feel seen. Like maybe my past doesn't define me. I'm in foster care now. I've never cried over a video before, until yours. She stared at the screen for a long time, her heart a strange mixture of stunned, humbled, and uplifted. Elliot knocked lightly on her door, holding a tray with breakfast. French toast, her favorite. Rise and shine, internet superstar, he said with a warm smile. Amara looked up, eyes wide. I think something big just happened. Over the next few days, her speech continued to gain momentum. Local news outlets reached out. Then national ones. Ellen, NPR, even a nonprofit that supported aged-out foster youth contacted her. Elliot made sure everything was filtered through kindness and care. He didn't let the attention overwhelm her. He reminded her daily that she didn't owe anyone anything. You speak because you want to, he said. Not because they expect you to. Amara nodded each time, but deep down, she knew something else. This wasn't just a moment for her. It was the start of her mission. 3 months later, Amara launched a small online blog called Still Worthy. It wasn't flashy, just a simple site where she shared her experiences, offered resources for other foster youth, and featured anonymous guest stories from people who had never had the courage to speak up before. In the first week, 10,000 people visited. In the second, over 30,000. By the end of the month, she was partnering with a nonprofit to create a digital safe space for foster teens, complete with mentorship matching, live chats, and encouragement journals. She even convinced Elliot to join one of the blog's podcast episodes. He was hesitant. Me? I'm just a dad who cooks eggs and fixes leaky sinks. Amara laughed. Exactly. You're real. And that's what people need. During the recording, she asked him, What made you take a chance on me? Elliot paused. I didn't take a chance on you, Amara. I took a chance on love. And love doesn't come with conditions. She was quiet, tears in her eyes. You saved my life. He reached across the table. No, sweetheart. You saved mine. Back in school, things changed dramatically. No one looked at Amara like she was the quiet, damaged girl anymore. Teachers referred to her stories in class. Her guidance counselor invited her to lead a peer support group. Even students who had ignored her before now approached her, not out of curiosity but out of respect. But what meant most was her presence. The way she carried herself now. She laughed more easily. She held her head high. She wore colors she used to avoid: bright reds, deep yellows, hopeful blues. Elliot noticed it one day while watching her walk into the living room. "You shine now," he said softly. "It's like your light finally caught up with you." One afternoon, months after the adoption, a thick envelope arrived at the house. It was addressed to Amara Quinn and came from the State Board of Education. Inside was a letter. She read it aloud with shaky hands. "Dear Ms. Quinn, after reviewing your impact on youth advocacy and educational storytelling, we are pleased to award you the 2025 Youth Empowerment Honor for outstanding contribution to student voices. We invite you to speak at this year's National Education Summit as a keynote guest. Your story represents the kind of change we hope to see in every classroom across America." Elliot sat down heavily on the couch. "You're going to change the world, kid." She whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe I already am." The summit took place in a grand auditorium filled with educators, policymakers, and youth leaders from across the nation. Amara, dressed in a sleek navy dress and speaking with a quiet, unwavering power, took the stage and delivered her keynote titled, "We are not our trauma, we are our triumph." Every time you see a quiet student in the back row, wondering if they belong, remember, they may be writing a story bigger than we can imagine. I didn't ask to be broken. But I chose to rise. And now, I choose to help others rise with me. The crowd stood before she finished her final sentence. People wiped their eyes. Teachers hugged one another. One principal later said, "It was like hearing Maya Angelou speak from the body of a 17-year-old. That night, back home, Amara sat on the porch beside Elliot, their mugs of cocoa steaming in the cool breeze. "You ever think," she asked, "how crazy it is that one person, just one, can change everything?" He looked at her. "I think about it every day." "You did that for me too." She smiled. "You gave me a home, Dad. You gave me a reason." As the stars came out, Amara looked toward the sky. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was chasing something. She was something. A voice. A light. A survivor. A daughter. Epilogue. 3 years later, Amara Quinn published her first book. From Foster to Forever, The Story of How Love Found Me. It became a national bestseller. She founded a scholarship program for foster youth. Spoke in schools, hospitals, and juvenile centers. Trained teachers to spot invisible pain in their students. Raised funds for therapy programs for teens aging out of the system. But through it all, she remained grounded in one truth. Love, not perfection, heals. And the man who once made French toast in silence, afraid of messing up a scared girl's life, remained at her side. Not just as her adoptive father, but as her biggest believer. She thought no one would ever love her. Now, she teaches the world what real love looks like.